y'all. This is Market Explainer, America's #1 business news podcast. Before we do that, I want to tell everybody about Acre Gold. Meet the new store of value. It's same as the old store of value. The original store of value, gold. Timeless, thoughtfully designed, coming in at 2.5 gram increments. Acre Gold allows you to set up an account, make a monthly deposit, automatic deposit into that account. And when you reach the price of a 2.5 gram bar of gold, they send it to you. It's a great way. Imagine that. It's a great way for the seasoned gold investor or someone who's just getting started to invest in gold without breaking their back. You can click the link in the description down below, and you can get started with Acre Gold today. Now,
we actually signed up for this because I was a big fan of that particular process.
Yes.
It's crazy to me that people buy gold for it to, according to the company you're buying it from, sit in a warehouse somewhere, which really, like, seriously?
Yeah, what was the point of buying it then?
Well, but do you even know it's there? Like, do you like? There's going to be a point in the future where I think that a lot of those companies come out as fraud because they weren't actually buying the gold to back up what, you know what I mean.
And listen,
so
who do you
have
think
your gold in your hands?
Who do those companies think they are? The Federal Reserve?
Speaking of, Danny's starting one of those companies next week. No, I'm kidding. I'm joking. Go ahead. What's our next story?
This next story, no big deal. Okay. Came and went. And listen, this just proves what I've always been saying. Regulations don't hurt anybody except for the little guy. The Pandora Papers, which are a bunch of leaked documents based on a research project by 150 news outlets, which are probably all fake. 600 journalists got together. And, there's a statistic out there that the average journalist has an alcohol problem. So, not super reliable. But, this is a bigger cache of documents than the 2016 Panama Papers, from which they made, a couple of movies and all this other stuff.
Sure.
And basically, what the takeaway from this story is a bunch of prime ministers, a bunch of heads of state, are tucking away their assets through shell corporations, and a handful of law firms help them do it. And the big takeaway is, duh.
Well, that's my whole duh. Like this is so. When originally this came out, Danny and I were actually going to talk about this last week, and we decided to postpone it a week because I was very interested to see where this story was going to go and how much
nowhere.
Exactly, and
it was
how it was really going to influence.
It just went like this,
right? Because there was nothing in here. 600 people, journalists, right? 12 million files, yada yada. Took them some time to go through this, but so far of everything I've read about this story, there's nothing in here that would surprise anybody. Not anywhere in what we would call the developed world. I think out of all of this, the part of me that is the most not surprised, but I hope that there are people out there in countries out there that are in these areas, because part of this paper was there are impoverished nations out there that are still under either dictatorships or monarchies that are in these papers are these dictators and monarchies, while there are people in countries that are starving, that have nothing, have tucked away millions and millions of dollars.
Hundreds of millions of dollars
away from their own country, their own people.
And so I don't want to get into what specific countries, because I like living. I'm super into living my life. I'm not sick. I'm very careful driver. I always wear a seatbelt. I like living my life. So if, I take 2 to the back of the head, we all know what happened. But, this was, there's a lot of different videos you can go watch online about this whole thing. The takeaway from the 2016 Panama Papers was that all these huge these wealthy individuals were going out there and doing things with this law firm called Mossack Fonseca in Panama, where they tucked their assets to avoid tax. Here in the United States of America, we have this Supreme Court ruling that says whatever you can legally do to mitigate your tax burden, you're allowed to do that.
Absolutely. It's perfectly legal. And we have two or three states, I think Delaware is one of them,
Delaware,
that are
Nevada,
actual
South
tax
Dakota.
havens.
Yes.
And in the last decade have become some of the biggest tax havens in the world, by the way. Okay, so, we like to pick on places like Switzerland and, you know what I mean, these kind of places. Right. But the states that are tax havens in the United States have become some of the largest tax havens for the international world.
So the thing is, you know, the United States is a weird country. It's one of only 2 countries in the world that taxes you based on citizenship. Right. So if you're a non-citizen of the United States, it's easier to tuck and hide assets in the United States, because if you're a citizen of the United States, they are going to make you pay your taxes one way or the other. And pay is a funny word, because I've never paid a tax before. They just take my money. Well, the government just takes my money.
90% of, in this case, the Pandora Papers or whatever, you're talking about tax havens in the form of, very simply, shell corporation buying physical property. Right? Yep. Like that's the tax haven is, you know, and then turning around and on your actual taxes for your country, taking that as a loss, right? Because it's an expenditure for a corporation to purchase an asset, right? And that kind of stuff. So it's a very simple process, and in some places very legal, right? Yeah. And the people that have done this, though, again, I don't think there's anybody that reads this so far of what's come out of this, and I'm not reading 12 million affidavits, files. I'm not reading them. What's so far come out of this, I don't think surprises anybody, right? Whether it's politicians, is it really a story that a politician in America, in Great Britain, in Russia, or anywhere else bought a $5 million home in the Alps of wherever that, you know what I mean?
In the name of their mistress.
In the name of their, right, exactly. Is that a surprise to anybody? I mean,
it's not. But here's what is a surprise to me, and here's where I'm going to put on my tinfoil hat. There's no Western countries in these papers. There's no America. You're not finding out about the sitting president, the former president, or there's an entire TikTok trend right now of tracking the trades of people in Congress, including the Speaker of the House, and making money from it, because what they're and it's people are making. People are saying these are some of the most brilliant trades of all time. I wonder where they come up with this stuff.
Well, but it's not illegal, right?
Yeah, it's not illegal.
And that becomes the problem, is a lot of things, and this just brings it up. A lot of these, well, you just said it on taxes, right? If there's a way out, the Supreme Court has said if there's a way out, that this is the argument of simplifying tax code. There's actually right now, they're talking about international business taxes, right? And these kind of things. So are they ever going to do anything to close these quote-unquote loopholes? Are they ever going to need to do anything to make things like, should Congress be able to buy stock in a company that they have a say in giving a government contract? And guess what? This is not a new thing. They've been doing this since the creation of government, with shipping contracts and, you know what I mean? Yeah. All these kind of things.
This is the second oldest profession.
Right.
Yeah. So, and listen.
It's called grifting you know what I mean? Like,
I included this. This is a pseudo-political story, but the reason I included that in the lineup this week was how quickly nobody cares about this. And
it was astounding to me. It was really surprising. I thought this was actually going to be a story, and it turned out to be nothing as far as people caring.
Because for one reason or another, society has this thing about holding to account the petty, just the decamillionaire, the decimillionaire with $100 million, who's tucking his money so his ex-wife can't get it. Here in Texas, we have a billionaire down in Houston who his money didn't have to leave the shore. his money was just tucked away in a trust in South Dakota, and his ex-wife will get nothing. That's what she deserves, by the way.
Dan, that is not an opinion of me or Market Explainer. That's an opinion of Danny. I didn't say that, nor do I necessarily agree with that.
So, but what the roundabout here is, the kind of overall perspective here is, for some reason, everyone's fine with government officials, and in many of these situations, countries that the United States, you, the taxpayer, sitting right now, listening to this podcast, watching this podcast, have unwittingly provided financing for several of these
aid and funding and stuff like that, and they've got more than that sitting in offshore accounts that the heads of state have
tucked away,
hidden and tucked away. Yeah.
So there was this, I'll close on this. This is a political whatever, but there was this congressman, an old congressman, a country doctor from here in Texas, who said foreign aid is where you take from the poor and the middle class of a first world country and give it to the 1% of a third world country, or the president of a third. And that's literally what has happened here. So however you think things should be distributed, the reality is you're taking from poor and middle class people whose number one largest line item household expense is taxes in the United States. The largest line item single expense a family in the United States has is their taxes. And we're taking that money from those people, food out of their kids' mouths, gas out of their tank, so we can give it to some king, some president of some country that you're never going to visit because it's too icky to visit. Just saying. Again,
those are the opinions of Danny that I don't necessarily agree with, not Market Explainer. You can always email him at danny@upyours.com.
That's correct.
I think to close out, my final thought of this is I've yet to read a single article that holds anyone accountable for anything that's came out of this. Not a single one. That
you can't hold them accountable.
When I say accountability, I mean there are different levels of accountability, like a slap on the wrist or go to jail, right? There's all these things in the middle. I have yet to read a single article about anyone, including the Queen of England, that is in these papers that has there's been nothing happened to. Nothing. Nothing.
And it's simple. People accept that this is the cost of the state. And what is offensive to me as a guy who, has opinions about government, it's what's offensive is that they're like, hey, there's a guy who made $10 million who's just trying to keep us $10 million. He made $30 million. He already gave 20 of it to the government. He's just trying to keep this last 10. And so he does all this trickery and chicanery. But here's this government official, hundreds of millions of taxpayer, funding from the various governments all over the world. Well, naturally, he should be tucking this away in the name of his mistress. Who cares?
Well, and again, if there's no accountability, they're going to continue to do it, right?
There's no way to hold them accountable. But we're going to move on to another story.